Hello.
Hi.
Welcome to the show with no intro. Let's start things off right away. What's your name and what does it mean?
So my name is Liebe and it means love in German. So if you've heard of Ich liebe dich, it means I love you in German. And when I was younger, my mother used to call me Liebkins. It means like little lover or sweetheart in German. So I think my grandmother, who was from Germany, she just called me like Liebe Biba or something.
Oh, well, how long have you been a mother?
I have been a mother for 18 years. And I say 18, even though my son won't be 18 for a few months, only because, when I'm bearing or when I'm carrying the child inside, I am already a mother. So yeah, it's been 18 years.
18, and you've carried 4 children, is that right?
Yes, 4 children.
Let's start right off with birth. I mean, what is that experience like?
It depends on how big the kids are. When they're born, I had 2 almost 8.5 pounds.
Wow. And
then I had like a 7 pound and like 6 pound, 10 ounce daughter. So I would say my lightest ones were my easiest. And my third was, I thought he would be easy, but he kind of had his arm in the birth canal. We had to like go in there and, straighten that out.
Wow.
So that took a while, but I would say that the word pain doesn't even come close to what the experience of childbirth is like, because I've had 4 unmedicated vaginal births.
Wow.
So yeah, no C-section, just kind of no pain medication, just kind of go right into and experience the full range of what I would call agony.
Wow.
I think that is a more descriptive, better word.
And I mean, and even after the first, you said, yes, again, that's fine, no medication. And each time you knew what was coming.
Yes.
I mean, is there another side to that coin of extreme relief after the pain, or is the feeling of birth different when you don't have the medication? Is there something that you were searching for each time that you would have felt you missed out on had you been medicated?
I feel that I just wanted to give my children the most healthy delivery without them being medicated. Right. Because a medication, it passes through your system and it, so it somehow affects the baby.
Sure.
And I just wanted to be free from having any meds in my body.
Wow.
When they came through. So it was more for my children that I'm sacrificing my own comfort.
That's incredible.
I just felt, for when my kids came out, I would say my most difficult one was my home birth, and she was my last, but I did end up losing about 2 pints of blood.
Wow. Which
is a lot. And I passed out when I went into the bathroom to clean up myself. I wasn't ready to get up.
Yeah.
So that was a little difficult, but yeah, it's definitely only the contractions that are really tough, and men don't have the endorphin code to actually endure something like childbirth pain.
Wow.
So it's something that I would, like I said, pain isn't even the word to use. It would be more like agony, where clawing your fingers into your eye sockets brings relief. Like when you're in a contraction, that would be like bringing relief. Just incredible. Digging your fingernails in your skin would bring relief, because it's so overwhelming.
Yes.
Yeah.
And is each contraction sending that a bit of agony, or is the exact moment of birth the most painful?
No, actually, so the ring of fire, when it dilates to 10 centimeters or however long, if I think it's 10, basically it's natural pain relief when the nerves are pinched in the opening, so you don't actually feel when the baby comes out, and when you rip, you don't feel it.
Wow.
Because it's just all the nerves are kind of not, cut off from the stretching.
Right.
It's kind of getting into detail here about,
It's fine.
but this is all part of, it's nature's, pain relief. It's more the contractions and so intense and so overbearing, and it feels like I don't even know what death feels like, but it feels like death.
It feels like beyond any word that could describe it.
Yes, and maybe because I also was dissociated from my body in the relationship that I was in at the time, and not really connected in a way where women who take hypnobirthing classes would feel more connected and relaxed. The mind-body connection, I really didn't have that mastered, because at that time I had a very unregulated nervous system.
Right.
So maybe it could have been better and less painful if I had been more connected to my body.
Right. Well, that's the journey we're gonna touch on now, right?
Yeah.
And to start, okay, so your moment of choice came very early. You wanting to be the best mother you could, chose immediately to not have that medication. And at the same time, I wanted to ask about the choice of being a mother, because I feel like people assume this just natural want or urge that comes from their mom to take care of them, whereas the reality is it's something that you wake up and actively participate in. And there is always another choice. There is always a choice to not be a mom, or to run away, or to do things an easier way or something. And can you tell me about that, about waking up every day and looking at these four faces and deciding you're going to be who you are?
Well, if people ask me, how do you do it, I just do it. It's innate. Motherhood is innate, based on sacrifice and unconditional love and nurturing. And I want to say I don't have a choice. You were talking about a choice, but I get up and yes, it is a choice, but I also feel like my children, this is them, and I'm taking care of other, the responsibility of caring and nurturing for littles, from the time they're born to adult, is a huge responsibility.
Right.
In the direction that you steer them and the guidance that you give them and the care. And
so you never saw it as an option.
Exactly.
You never even validated, because
right.
Obviously there are mothers who don't live up to the name, and
right.
Either neglect their children or leave them or and that's why I ask. But it sounds like to you it was something that required no thought. It just was it was something that you wanted so badly, to just take care of these children, right?
It's just something inside of me. I've always wanted children. I just knew that I wanted children, at least one children, and then here's 4 kids later, and it's a lot. It's a lot.
Well, and that leads me to the next thing. Okay, let's say you do make the choice and you assume the role of mother. Being loved and trusted as a mom is also not a given, right? And I want to ask, how do you earn the title of mom, and how do you establish that relationship with this being that has come into your life?
Well, it's interesting, because I do believe parenthood is a relationship and not a role. You need to provide them a space, to a nurturing, unconditional, loving presence in their life, where they feel safe with you, where they feel like they can trust you.
Right.
A mother is the ultimate life giver, sustainer, and nurturer,
right.
Just kind of like Mama Gaia, in Earth, and how we're 100% dependent on her for food, air, water. She provides it all. She nurtures us, and she is a life sustainer for us. And just kids can't survive without their mother.
I wanted to ask about the not so fun part about motherhood, in that it pretty much starts right away. I mean, right after birth, you have the noise, the screaming and the yelling and the, the crying. And then right after the noise, you have the mess, the cleaning up of the food and the diapers and everything. And then after the mess, you have the chaos, the running and the fighting and after all of this, after a decade, then you have the thanklessness of the teenage years. And I have to ask, and I've witnessed all of this because I grew up in a daycare. My parents took care of 12 kids all in our home all throughout my life. And how do you stay sane through that process? And how do you find space for yourself and for your own mental health?
Well, I mean, when they're young, when they're infants, like they can't clean up after themselves. So you're always cleaning up after them, feeding them, changing them. And then there comes a certain time where you teach them to clean up after their mess. Okay, you spilled this, clean it up. Even now, I have 3 teenage boys, 3 high school boys.
Right.
They do something, they spill something. And then I have my youngest daughter, and she's in middle school, but it's like, okay, you know what? No need crying over spilled milk. You just clean the milk up. I don't care.
Right.
I don't care what mess you made. It doesn't matter. I'm not mad at you. Just clean up after yourself. I tell them I'm not going to do for you what you can do for yourself. But then I kind of like vacillate a little bit. It's like I still cook the meals. Like they're teenagers, they can cook too. But I still cook for them because that's the motherly, like just providing, the giving, like the mother is always in giving mode. But like, so finding time for myself, it's just kind of having to get away in my room. And there's a lot of guilt that I have to work through. Even taking time for myself and like not paying attention to my kids makes me sometimes feel guilty.
Really?
But it's easier when they're at school, and then I could find that time. I'm like by myself.
Because when they're young, I mean, sometimes you can't even go to the bathroom by yourself.
I know.
Right?
They just like barge in. They want to be with you when you're going on the toilet. It's just a part of motherhood. I know that happens a lot. It's a lot more work when they're younger because you got to bathe them, shower them, etc. And then when they grow up, like you can brush your teeth by yourself, go to the bathroom by yourself, shower by yourself, even make food by yourself. It does get easier, but there's still like, okay, I'm going to be in my room. I have a call with a friend. I'm talking to somebody, or I'm going to do a meditation or whatever I'm going to do. Whatever self-care practice I have, sometimes it's taking a bath or whatever, or going out in nature and sitting under a tree. And my kids understand, like, mom's not here right now. So self-care comes kind of hard for me just because it's like, I wish I had more time for self-care, and I really don't. And then sometimes I'm just like, I don't know. And then I space out, like I'm on my phone, like scrolling, and I'm just like, okay, this is not really healthy either. It's not self-care. It's just like zoning out. And sometimes I feel like I just need to zone out for a few minutes because I have so much going on. I do chores, errands, phone calls. Like I uphold everything. I deal with their school and their teachers and get on top of them for their grades. And we need to get up in the morning for school, and trying to get them to bed at a decent time. I mean, it's like a lot. And
that's a huge chore, right? The getting into the bed and getting out of the bed. I mean, this is
the
mother's playbook, right? Of how the strategies, the schemes, the bargaining.
Oh yeah, the bargaining and the discipline.
Well, and so speaking on that, how do you hold your ground? When you establish a boundary, you establish a rule that is going to benefit the family or create safety that will be something that will benefit everyone, but they're pushing back on. How have you been able to establish yourself as the voice of authority?
It's been a long practice for me to get better and better at holding my ground, because it's like, it's so easy to just give in to them. is kind of like holding my ground, is like holding space for their resistance. And you know what, this is the way it's going to be. And that's just the way it is.
Yeah.
And they're all like disgruntled or complain or whatever, you know, I do try to, you know, come to a common ground with them of agreement.
Let's say you've established a boundary, it's clearly been crossed. You know, and what I'm getting at is, you know, what is the line between discipline and abuse? You know what I mean? Because people seem to always toe this one line in the extreme of one or the other. Mm-hmm. And obviously discipline is necessary, you know, to some degree. But what's been your experience with that?
Okay, so the first part of your question was about giving an example. Just kind of like, okay, if you cross this boundary or if you don't do what I had asked, then you don't earn whatever it is, like the PlayStation, you know, you don't get time on it.
Right.
And I always say, okay, if you do, I want to make it sound like positive.
Right.
If you do this, then you can, you know, get the privilege, instead of making it a negative, like,
I see.
Because you didn't do this, this is taken away from you. I want to make it sound more like an incentive. If you do something, you get this.
Right.
And then the second part of your question is the line between discipline and abuse. And like, discipline is more edification, like for the child. Is it edifying the child? It's kind of a form of guidance. And abuse is degradation. It's being violent. Abuse is violence, whether it's verbal or physical. And it's negative, you know, towards the growth of a child. Discipline is positive.
Right.
It's, you know, discipline is doing something in the best favor of your child.
Right. And well, you know, and honestly, anytime I've seen, probably the worst examples of parenting I've seen happen to come from when the parent sees the child as an equal. Mm-hmm. And so therefore the parent must use tactics that they would against another adult to either bring them down or make them feel a certain way. And can you speak on that? And why do people do this? And what would be your advice to someone who's maybe not even aware that they're doing that?
Well, I think adults project their wounds on their children. Like you know, and it gets back to their own childhood and the way their parents treated them. And if I'm treated like this, if I was treated like this, then I get to treat my child like this so he can feel like the same wound. We always want to project our wounds on other people so they can see how it feels. But that's like the negative ego, you know, working there in that case. And really what I've learned is my own wounds in being in an abusive relationship with my kids' dad, struggling with a very dysregulated nervous system, and not being conscious of how I really treated my kids.
Right.
And so I've definitely come a long way in relating to them, especially in the last year. I've really feel like my nervous system has become more regulated as I self-care and being more present with myself, holding space for my own wounds, my own drama. When you could hold space for yourself, you can hold space for your child.
I see.
Because if you're not holding space for yourself, and the way that you view yourself is like how you're going to view your child. It all gets back to self, like
to self-love.
Self-love, how much self-love you have for yourself is how much you will have for your child, and how much you could give your child. You cannot give your child more love than you have for yourself.
Wow. And you know, and that's beautiful. And you mentioned unconditional love, and I wanted to ask, you know, where is the balance between having expectations,
yeah.
right? But then there's also this idea of unconditional love, whereas that literally there's no condition on the love. And I feel that both extremes, you know, micromanaging and complete and utter freedom, can have negative outcomes.
Yes.
You know, right? And it's so what is the balance of that, and what does unconditional love truly mean?
I definitely feel that you need to give space to your children to mess up.
Okay.
Because when I was in, you know, the relationship with their dad, there was no space to mess up. It was like you laughed and giggled, then you were grabbed and sent to your room. Wow. Just for, I mean, and yeah, everything else too.
Right.
Conflict, like it was so dysregulated. There has to be space for allowing your kids to mess up and not getting angry at them, and having that compassion and that unconditional love for, you know, you just have the unconditional love for them no matter what they do. Like if they flunk out of high school, are you going to still love them? Of course. There's definitely a line between guidance and controlling and micromanaging.
Sure.
I'm definitely trying to balance that.
Well, and it's tricky because, you know, there's two forces that you're trying to provide at the same time. You're trying to give something that pretty much no one else on earth will be able to give them, the purest love from your heart. But at the same time, you want to somewhat prepare them for this world, you know, and you want to set standards, and you want to create a realistic idea of what it means to exist where your freedom bumps into someone else's freedom. And so what's been your experience as far as, you know, your children kind of experiencing both ends of that, and what is the balance between that?
So I've brought a lot of freedom, and I had a focus of bringing more freedom into their lives because the way they were raised by their dad, we didn't have freedom. So when my kids' dad left, and we can get into that, but I let my kids play in the snow. And so my oldest was 10 at the time, and I got a picture of him, and you could see his aura against the white snow. It was like this bright light around him that was within his auric field. It was really interesting. And that was the first time like he just ran free to play in the snow, the first time in his life.
Wow.
Because of how controlled my kids were and how they didn't grow up normal, right, and have the normal experiences that like most kids in America have.
And you had mentioned, you know, while you were still with the father of your children, that something as simple as giggling would be met with a stern abrasion. And I wanted to ask, you know, something that I've witnessed in my mom is this protective instinct. You know, you hear about stories about, you know, a bear protecting their cub, you know, with the extreme ferocity, and you think like, oh, well, that's an animal, that's of course, but it's, you know, I've seen it firsthand. You know, my mom has protected me in I've seen a glaze go over her eyes where she is now blind to any kind of vulnerability or circumstance, and the only thing that it matters is what is causing harm to her child,
right?
You know, and I'll always remember that, and I'll always want to emulate that in the future, you know, of having that courage to do that for me. And so I want to ask, you know, have you ever been triggered in that way where you felt this primal carnal instinct to protect your child?
Yes, I have. For like 15 years, it was more psychological, spiritual abuse towards me, and control and manipulation. but with the kids, it was more physical. The last year, it was physical towards me because I went through some massive changes the last year I was with him.
And this is 7 years ago, right? So
yes.
Okay.
So 2015 was the last year that I was with him. And something clicked in me. I went through a massive awakening, but we could get into that. Anyway, to answer your question, yeah, there were a few incidences where I stood up to him when he was abusing the kids, and I got abused for it.
Wow.
I got thrown down. I got my wrists twisted, and they hurt for days after. Like, wow. I got grabbed by the arm, and I'm like, wow, this is what my kids go through when he grabs their arm. And to this day, my oldest son, his left arm is weaker than his right arm.
Right.
It's just always been like that because of the abuse that he got from his dad. Wow. So yeah, that fierceness of wanting to protect your child, right? And I remember an incident happened with another child hurting one of my kids, and I just told the kid, this is your warning, or I'm going to tell your parents if this happens again. Right. You know, it's like doing it, not mean, not like, I'm going to kick your ass, you know, you little kid.
But you communicated immediately.
Yeah.
What you wanted.
Yes. And I will speak up. Like, I am like quadruple Leo energy. Sure. So like, you will hear me roar.
It's beautiful.
And I have enough fire to stir the pot and to burn bridges, you know, like with my kids' dad. So.
Well, and so can you tell me a little bit about that, if you're comfortable? You know, because you mentioned when we talked before about how you got with him, and at first, you know, you were completely under his influence. And can you tell me a little bit about what led to that, and when was the moment that you realized something was wrong, and when was the moment that you decided to make a change?
Okay, well, I'm not sure how far back to go, but I was raised in a fundamental Christian home.
Okay.
So I believe in God, and God speaks to me, and there's the Bible. God speaks to me through the Bible, and this is all like a belief system that I went through for many years, entrenched in this religion. And I thought God told me to marry this person or to be with this person. And so I did. And because like I'm this loyal Leo, I was like devoted 100% in. And then it was the classic sign, like he was a covert narcissist, not really overt, very covert and private, and like in the public in front of other people or in front of friends, he was like totally different person.
Really?
Than he was behind closed doors. He claimed to be a prophet of God, and so like he had this somehow direct connection to God that I really admired, and I felt like I looked to him for answers. I looked to him for like what I should be doing. Like I gave my power to him. I just didn't question anything for so many years. And because a classic narcissistic trait is to basically isolate you from everyone you know, that happened to me. For many years, I didn't see my mother. She didn't even know I had 4 kids.
Wow. For
a long time.
And this type of person will make it seem like it's not them, it's that just the universe is like this, and that we happen to be in this bond, and this is just how it works. It's not a unique situation. It's just, this is how the rule of the world is.
Well, I'm going to say this about the Bible, and I know people watching this are probably not going to agree, but the Bible was written by like seriously misogynistic, chauvinistic patriarchs who basically put into the Bible, you know, the wife is supposed to obey her husband. And that was the basis of my relationship with him, because he was a Bible believer. And so he is like, this is the way it's going to be. And, you know, I was this quiet, submissive wife for so long, and it just got to the point where like it was probably in 2013, 2012, 2013, I like literally wanted to end my life. I
Really?
seriously just fantasized about ending it all, because at that point I had a first and second grader. I was homeschooling. I had 2 children in diapers.
Wow.
I was nursing 1 child. I had to do all the meals, all the household chores, everything.
And the father was like another child, correct? It was like you had 5 children. Right?
Absolutely.
He wasn't developed enough to take care of himself.
He didn't even know how to cook.
Yeah.
So I basically cooked. The only thing he knew how to do was eat cereal and slap some meat between 2 slices of bread.
Right.
Okay, so I did everything. And at that point, we're so isolated from the outside world. We were home all the time. And because he didn't work on purpose to control us, to control where we went, he had to drive me everywhere. He wouldn't let me drive anywhere by myself.
Wow. And you said if you were to ever go to the park, it was just 1 kid at a time. Right?
Yeah.
And for how long even?
Yeah, well, it was a special case where we lived, where I was like a block away from a park, where he let me and I would be at the park with my child sobbing. I didn't have anybody. I didn't even have him coming to the park with us. Like, it broke my heart. And there were so many times I just sobbed behind the scenes, because if he saw me crying, he would just belittle me and berate me. So I just learned how to suppress my feelings, my anger, my frustrations, my sadness. And so in 2013, I made a friend on social media, on Facebook. And so my kids' dad let me have social media, but he had to have like my passwords to check my messages. But during this time, he didn't. It was, I confided in this lady, and I was scared to death, because I wasn't allowed to talk to anybody about our family life at all. And I just felt that he was this prophet of God who claimed to have power to curse people, and people were like judged by God if they talked against him. So he saw himself as everyone was against him, and he was against everyone. Like, he was victim, like severe victim mentality.
Wow.
He was raised by a Marine Corps drill sergeant father who whipped him with a belt well into his teen years. So he had his own masculine wounded.
So his version is, well, I'm not so bad. He thinks, you know.
Right. Oh, I turned out okay.
Right.
No, you didn't, because now you're a narcissist who is just, you know, projecting all of your wounds onto us and your control. So I confided in this lady, and for a whole month, I'm like, this is what's going on. This is what's going on. This is what's going on. And I'm just waiting to hear what she's going to tell me.
Yeah.
Like, just say something to me. Right.
Right.
But she was like, oh, I understand. Oh, yeah. Then one day she's like, you need to leave. And that was my validation. That, like, right there at that point, it was like, oh my God, somebody thinks that I can do better.
Yeah. That
I actually can do something. Like, somebody's actually, wow, can I actually leave?
Right.
So it was that time I left. I went to a DV shelter. My stepdad came with the cops, and he got us out.
So you messaged him secretly?
Yes.
And said, hey, I need this.
Right. So I had an appointment with WIC, Women, Infant, and Children, where you can get vouchers to buy food at the store, because we were on welfare. And because he didn't work, we were always on food stamps and welfare, right? So one day, so I couldn't drive anywhere by myself. Like, I was so controlled and monitored. So when I went to my WIC appointment, I was hoping and praying that he wouldn't come in with me. He's like, just go in, because he would just sit in the car and wait for me to do my appointment.
Right.
So I went in.
So by chance, he just happened to knock. He was like, okay, you go ahead by yourself. And so that gave you just a small window of time.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
you go in.
Yeah, I go in and the caseworker, you know, I had my interview and blah, blah, blah. I'm just, you know, I said I need to use a phone. I need to call my stepdad. I'm in an abusive situation. And so I called my stepdad, and I hardly know my stepdad. Like, at that point, I had met him one time, so I barely know him, and I tell him I need help. I need to escape this situation.
Right.
He tells my mom, he plans with me, and then like we kind of email back and forth. He calls the Portland Women's Crisis Line.
Yeah.
And he's like, my stepdaughter needs a place. It's so hard to get into a domestic violence shelter.
Right.
So he said that they told him there is one opening for one mother and 4 children, and 2 have to be under 4 years old.
Wow.
And it fit my description perfectly. Like, it was so landed by the universe to work that out.
Incredible.
It was very miraculous. And so the day that my stepdad was going to come, my kid's dad is like, I'm going to run to the bank. And I'm just like, this is my break.
Wow.
Like, I'm on the phone with my stepdad. And at that time, I didn't even own a cell phone. I didn't until I was in my like mid 30s.
Wow.
I never owned a cell phone till my mid 30s.
Wow.
So I'm freaking out. I'm trying to time this perfectly where when he goes to the bank, as soon as he leaves, I'm rushing to get all of my bags packed.
Yes.
I'm throwing clothes in bags. I'm rushing so fast because I know that he's going to be really quick. Like, literally, I don't know, what was it, like 10, 15 minutes? I throw everything into the carport.
Yeah.
I go out there with my kids to wait for my stepdad because my stepdad's like, I'm on the way with 2 policemen and I'm waiting for them and we're going to be there as soon as possible. Well, guess who showed up? My kid's dad.
Yeah.
He saw our bags. He saw me with the kids. He's like, get it into the house right now.
And what did
I
you
go
say?
into the house.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm leaving you. And I was scared to death.
I mean, this is not only some man, but you at the time he was like the God's prophet.
Yeah,
you know?
he was
So
God's prophet. You don't mess with God's prophet.
You don't even know what powers he's claiming to have. This is a big moment.
Right. It's a huge moment. So I'm in there and I'm like, I have my daughter in my arms. And at the time she was 18. No, was she 18 months old? Okay. She was like about 18 months old because it was April 2013. And he's like, no, I go to open the door and he puts his foot there. I couldn't open the door.
Yeah.
And I immediately turned and went out the back door. There was a back door and I went out there.
Wow.
And when I was coming up in front of the house, the policemen were coming up the walk.
Just in time.
Incredible. So we all go back in there, and of course he's so calm, cool, and collected. Like, I don't know what's going on. I don't know. Like, she just wanted to leave with the kids. I don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
It's, you know, so the police had to be there or there's no way I could have left. And my stepdad took me to the DV shelter. Well, it was all arranged where I was picked up by DV staff because nobody, not even my stepdad, could know where I was being transported. I didn't even know it was a DV shelter till 3 days.
Right.
I was just like, I was a mess. My kids were out of control. Like, where's dad, you know? And
well, and that's the thing is as soon as when someone leaves this type of relationship, there's this vacuum almost, right?
Yep.
Where they were providing in their way some sense of, what would you say, structure or order, even if it was terrible and uncomfortable, it was still there, and suddenly it's gone. You know, and so I wanted to ask you about that. You know, there's always this quote that rings in my mind. You know, man or mankind is condemned to be free. You know, and can you speak to that? And what did it feel like that first moment, not being under his supervision.
The pain of the separation, being with somebody for that many years, it was so painful, like you could feel it in your body. It was physically painful. So I left him twice.
Right.
That was the first time, and I felt extremely guilty for leaving, like extremely, oh my God, you know? And so I only could go a week, and I couldn't take it anymore. Like I had to communicate with him, because he was like, since I left, like constantly emailing me.
Right.
Oh, can you really rethink this over? I'll give you more freedoms. I'll allow you to do this. I'll allow you to do that. He was trying to bargain with me.
Right.
And it's like, looking back, it's like, wait, so you held my freedom because I'll give you more freedom, as if you owned my freedom. Like, it's so twisted.
Right.
Right. So I was so codependent, feeling so guilty. I was too weak.
Well,
and I went back.
And the kids, they don't know how to be even without this figure at the moment. And what were you saying about, on average, people?
Yeah, on average, a woman who is abused returns to her abuser an average of 8 times after she leaves. Like, so that's an average. So some less, some more.
Right.
It took me one time. I took him back one time to see if what he was promising he was going to fulfill. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I went through a lot in that transition in the DV shelter, and then staying with some family friends until I got my own apartment. So I got into an apartment and bought my first vehicle and got my own cell phone, my first cell phone ever.
Wow.
And I did it all without a job. Like, how do you get into an apartment without a job, right?
Yeah.
Organizations that help with rent. I mean, that's a blessing when you need it, especially like domestic violence grants that you could get from the county.
And how did you learn about those, and how did you apply it for those if anybody's needing that?
Well, like 211, you can call 211 and find out. There's grants for women in my case. And then the DV shelter I was in gave me so many resources of where I can source like funding and housing. Like they take you through they give you all of that stuff. So I got me and the kids in that place. Then I got into public housing by myself, and then I put the kids' dad on the lease. And so we moved into a place where he was actually on the lease.
Right.
And we were there for a year. And that was the year I said that he got violent towards me. Mm-hmm. When I started standing up to him, he started getting, and oh my God, like, no way, like the submissive, quiet wife and woman that he wanted, like, no way. I started losing that in 2013.
Wow.
Like, I'm just done with this, because to me, submission means forced obedience.
Right.
But there's also a way a man can lead a woman if he's connected to her heart and knows her desires and knows what she needs and wants. And that's after he can prove to me he can lead his own heart.
Right.
But my kids' dad, he was so disconnected from his own heart.
Well, and it almost seems like this period where you had him back was almost a validation of this new self that you're coming into. It was almost a necessary step to have this period where, now that you've awakened this new era, he's back, but you're not the same. And it's more proof that you need for him to get away. It almost sounded like a necessary thing, you know?
It was, because it was like a dynamic of showing myself, like the contrast of what I knew that I didn't want and what I wanted. And it all unfolded in something that I would say happened within a month, something very, very supernatural that I call a heart awakening, a massive heart awakening that I went through. It was very like, I can't even, it's so supernatural. It came from the higher realms, and
What
it would
happened?
just, this energy that would flow through me. It was something that started happening at night, in the middle of the night. I would just wake up and all this energy, like it would feel like these feelings I've never felt. And I'm gonna say it almost felt like orgasmic. The energy, it was almost like the universe was making love to me and pushing out all of this energy. And pushing out all of this negative energy, all of this trapped emotions. It was like flowing. There was something flowing, something broke in my system.
Incredible.
Where this like higher dimensional like energy was just surging through my body. And this happened over a course of a month, and it happened right next to my kids' dad. Like I'm next to him in bed, and he doesn't know what's going on, but holy crap.
Wow. And so that was kind of the trickle that started to begin this entire renaissance of your mind and body, right?
Yeah, because it totally changed me and opened me up to see that I didn't deserve what the treatment that I was getting. Like I didn't deserve any of this. And that, oh my gosh, maybe I can leave him. This isn't right. Like I should leave him.
Wow.
There was such a shift in the entire way I was thinking. Like at one point I thought, I'm going to be like this forever. Like this is my life forever. I had no dreams, goals, visions, because it was like, I'm a stay-at-home mom and this is your purpose. Your place is in the kitchen and in the rest of the house. And this is like, I didn't have any dreams, goals, or visions of my own life or future or what I wanted. It was about serving this man and giving my power away to him, and him verbally and psychologically abusing me. And so in the last, this whole transition of this heart awakening, like I call it, happened about 2 months before I got a restraining order. And that's when I started standing up to my kids' dad, because I knew it was going down and he knew it was going down. Like I am not the woman that he had at the beginning of our connection, beginning of our relationship. Like he started trapping me in rooms and he wouldn't let me out and berating me. Like he really cracked down on me, and I told you the abuse like really amplified towards me. And I saw a part of him that was really like the psychosis, the level of psychosis in his brain. And then like one day saying, and this is like all happened a couple of months before I got the restraining order, that he was going to get a gun to protect himself from me. I started sleeping in my daughter's room, where he barricaded the door at night in our bedroom because he thought he had a knife on the nightstand because he thought he had to protect himself from me. Well, somehow.
I think it makes sense to me, because it sounds like, you were coming into your power, and the very fact that you had spent over a decade taking care of 5 people means that amount of energy, power, and love that you were able to pour outwards, suddenly you were reflecting it upon yourself. And that amount of force is palpable. And I think he was scared. He was completely, he saw it, and he saw that he was no longer in control of you.
Exactly.
And the rest, it was only a matter of time.
It was. Yeah.
And that's amazing.
I know. At one time he took my phone away, and I grabbed his phone. I called his friend, and right in front of him told his friend that Andy's abusing me.
Wow.
And I was scared to death. My voice was shaking, but I was doing stuff I never could have imagined that I would ever do. And that was because when I told you about the heart awakening, what it was God's unconditional love just like flooding my system. So for the first time, like, oh my gosh, all this time I thought there was this patriarchal entity who punished people who went against the Bible or went against, like, there was something called sin, and if I sinned, he would strike me. So over the years, my kids' dad would threaten me and the kids that if we didn't obey him, God would punish us and strike us and kill us. And one of the last things my kids' dad said was, God told me that if you ever leave me, you're gonna die, that God would kill me, basically, as my punishment, like right after I left him. Well, here is 7 years later.
You're 7 years later.
But see, that, when he said that, that was like a dagger, an energetic dagger wound. Okay, so, and he did, over the years, and his verbal abuse put a lot of energetic daggers. Like, I had to heal so much and release all of those wounds and heal. Like, I'm still healing from those wounds.
You're healing, but here you are 7 years later, alive and thriving.
I was so scared. What is my kids' dad gonna do if I left him? Now, I was trying to leave him. He actually wanted me to leave, but I wanted to take the kids. I would have been glad to just get out and take the kids from him again and go into a DV shelter again. I would have been happy. I would have been homeless, but happy.
Of course.
Okay, fine. You want to live there? Fine. There was another incident where I heard again, and it was very clear. It was like, stop hiding in a corner. You know, I couldn't just sit there and like, how is this going to happen? Like, I needed to take action.
Right.
And then that's when I was in my apartment office talking to some staff people. I just was led to say, hey, I'm in this abusive situation. They're like, well, we have an advocate that we work with at YWCA. You could talk to her about a restraining order. I was in one of the rooms talking to her, and my kids' dad came into the office looking for me because I can't go outside of the apartment without him following me.
Right.
Or needing to know what I was doing. Well, he couldn't find me. I was in a room, separate room. So I'm just like, restraining order. I thought my life had to be in danger. I didn't feel like he was gonna like murder me or the kids, right?
But you had some video evidence.
Well, yeah, I actually had a lot of text messages where he was basically saying that my life was gonna end, that the life of my mother and stepdad were gonna end because they had helped conspire. My stepdad got me away from my kids' dad not once, but twice. And so my stepdad took me to get the restraining order. And then it took a few days for it to be served, where the police came and served him, right? And he was so pissed that day. He had about 15 minutes to get all his stuff and get out. So it was crazy. It was crazy.
It kind of must have been kind of nice to see someone ordering him around.
Yeah, and he hated it. I saw his look of anger, and I'm just like, kids, we're just huddled in the living room waiting for him to get his stuff.
Wow.
And it's like, wow, I actually did this.
What were the kids saying and thinking during this time, you think?
They were playing a game on my phone. I'm like, here, kids. They're like, oh, we get to play a game. Like, they didn't know what was going on.
But they wanted this, right? They knew that this was...
I didn't know if they knew what was going on because my oldest was 10 and my youngest was 4.
Right. So
I'm just like, Daddy's not here anymore, you know? Wow. And it's been like that ever since. So my kids' dad did contest the restraining order, and I was subpoenaed to go to court and to show up in front of a judge and to like present my case to the judge. Like, why are you not, what's going on, right? So I get into the courtroom, and there were 2 before me that were going before the judge with their cases. Yeah. And these were women, and the men were they were trying to get away from the men. And they were seriously gave a really good story about why they were in fear of their life and blah, blah, blah. And both times the judge, who was a woman, did not uphold the case.
Wow.
Which means that, hey, you have no evidence of your life being in danger, because she's the law arbiter. Like, she gets to just, like, this is not about how scary it sounds. This is about, do you have evidence that your life is in danger?
Right.
You need evidence. So after those 2 cases, and my case came up, I was just like, I'm screwed. What's going to happen? Like, okay, well, at least he's out of the house. If I have to deal with him later, I can. Thank God he's out of the house. Like, I just thought, like, I don't know what's going to happen.
But you had the evidence. You had the text. I had
text, and I had a video I took of him pinning my son down and my son receiving lacerations from that, and me taking a picture of the lacerations.
Wow.
So I showed the judge the video. I showed her all the text messages saying, like, how God was going to strike me dead, right? Yeah. I actually cross-examined my stepfather. I got him in the court.
Wow.
I got him up there, and I was like,
witness.
She upheld the case. So she's like,
she upheld the restraining order.
She upheld the restraining order.
And was that the absolute last time you ever saw him?
No. About 3 years ago, right before COVID hit, the restraining order lapsed, because you have to renew it every single year. So, like, I'm going to actually next week probably renew the restraining order, because the year is, like, almost over.
Wow.
It lapsed for a few months because I was sick. So I missed the cutoff. And then he actually showed up at my door and knocked, and I was shocked, because the last time I heard, he went to California. He's a stalker type. So an hour later, he came back, knocked again, and I knew he wasn't going to go away until he actually spoke to me.
Yeah.
My kids' school called and said, oh, he was down here asking for your kids. And they already had a copy of the restraining order, so they didn't let him see my kids. They actually, staff from that school drove my kids to Zupan's in Portland and met in the parking lot. And I took the kids, raced home, saw their kids' dad driving around the apartment parking lot. I immediately parked in a spot where he wouldn't see me or know what kind of car I drove, rushed my kids in there, knocked again. I waited for him to go down the steps, and then I opened the door, and like, what's up, right? He had some things for me. I said, you can put it on my doorstep when I go back into the house. Me and my kids don't want you in our lives anymore. And like, that was that. He was up here in the Northwest, and then he was going to go back down to California, but he just happened to be up here. Right. And so that was the only time that I saw him after. And I haven't seen him since, but he did break the restraining order twice. He text messaged me, like, within the first year of the order. So he leaves me alone now. As long as I renew the restraining order, because it's public record, he just puts the case number in there online and can see if, is there still an order against me? I'm still renewing the order after 7 years. I don't think I'm ready for him to come to my door and try to negotiate with me. Like, I have nothing to say to him, because like, I have so much Leo fire, I can burn the bridges. Like, I just do it.
You were able to make this choice for yourself and for your children, despite everything around you making it much easier to not act, and everything to condition you to stay and be with this person. You made a choice. And I want to ask what I ask everybody, do we have free will? Do we have a say in our destiny?
I believe we do. I believe that before we incarnate, we kind of know the theme of what our life is going to be like before coming down here. This is my perspective, by the way. And we know who we're going to interact with and the karmic contracts that we have with certain people down here. We play that out, and we kind of go through life to graduate. So I kind of went through this experience with my kids' dad in order to dive into the depths of the shadow side of men, like the patriarch side, the dark father side, and experience that in order to like understand, like on a spiritual level, and even unconsciously not even know why. But yeah, I believe there's a purpose of me going through with my kids' dad, that it was fate in a way, but I did have a choice to leave or stay.
Right.
And so it was a matter of time before, like, I had this awakening. I had a realization of God's unconditional love, that he's not this patriarchal entity gonna strike me for disobeying him.
Right.
Right? That there was no judgment, that what I did for myself and kids was an act of self-love. And you don't accrue negative karma for an act of self-love. You just don't. Right?
And so you believe in a soul that inhabits the body.
Yes.
And with that soul, you mentioned karma, this idea of karma kind of being the glue that binds us to this earth, in the sense that it's something that brings us into situations where we experience joy and we experience suffering.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to ask, you know, do your kids, do they see themselves as having suffered? You know, because I was moved by, recently I was watching an interview with Johnny Depp, and he was describing his childhood, which involved a lot of abuse from his mother and negligence from his father and a lot of moving around and all that. And the interviewer asked, you know, how did you feel? How did you exist like this as a child? And he said that he just didn't know any different. He didn't know to suffer. He just thought everybody lived this way. And so I would ask, you know, how have your kids dealt with this past?
So my oldest is the one that's stuck on feeling that he was gypped, and he didn't have a normal childhood, and there was nothing normal about his childhood because he was so constricted and deprived, I guess, not of food and water, but of fun and play and friendships and other connections. How we were so isolated. We had no village raising a child,
right,
or taking a village to raise a child. There was nothing like that. So he does feel like he was jaded. And now he feels even more jaded with not having a father in the house, and him blaming me, not for leaving, but for not having another father figure in the house, because like, it's been 7 years and I've gone through some really interesting, a couple connections, but
I mean, it's understandable to be that vulnerable with somebody again is a tall order.
It is.
And would you say that sometimes having the fountainhead of influence over your children and not having to compromise with a partner is kind of a silver lining to that? Would you say that?
Yeah. The thing is, I tell my kids in the right time, you know, I do believe that you will have another dad one day, and I will have a devoted life partner. And I wasn't ready for a really long time. I was in these connections that were not, there was no devotion, and they were very flippant. And I knew wasn't stable.
Right.
Or long lasting, right? So the thing about it is that it's better for them not to have a dad than an abusive dad. And in the right time, they'll have that dad. And yes, I'm not going to get with a man just so he can take care of my kids. It's not about that. Like,
right.
There's no way. It would definitely have to be like this predestined person.
Well, and you know, and oftentimes, you know, it's like, you know, a mom can only do so much. You know, ideally, a mom wants to create this situation that is the absolute best for their child, and so that they can thrive and be happy. But I would ask, how much of a child's own karma exists that's independent of your will Would you say that that is something that you've witnessed, where a child has its own journey and sometimes you cannot change it?
Exactly. As much as I would love to, well, as much as I have given my oldest, who is the one who has struggled with some emotional issues the most, in giving him the tools that he needed, and working through, help him to work through trauma, help him to release trauma, because the kids, even from the womb, absorb all like the negative trapped emotions from the mother, trapping them in his body. Like it's something that kids carry in the trauma they go through. I mean, I still feel guilty because I mistreated my kids when I was with my kids as dad, because if I couldn't keep my kids in line, then I would get it from him.
Right.
So I wasn't very kind to my kids, and there were some things I really regret, and I feel that I contributed to their trauma. And so giving my kids the tools, and I've hired healers, I have created meditations for them. I have prayed with them. I've done so much to them and for them in the pep talks. It's mainly my oldest. The other three don't even talk about their dad. Now, sometimes they say things that like are spiteful if they're just in a moment of weakness, reflecting on the past.
Right.
And I totally understand, and I forgive them.
Well, let me just ask you, I've unfortunately only have time for two questions.
Okay.
And I'd love to have you back sometime where we can talk more.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
But my last two questions. Number one, what is the message that you have for your children that you would want them to know? No matter how many times you've already said it to their faces or whatever, what is the one message you want to leave with them? And number two, the most important one, and this is focusing on you. And my question is, what do you want from life? Mm-hmm. And what do you want in this new chapter where, you will be on your own and have freedom once they're able to take care of themselves, And
yeah.
So what do you want from life?
Well, I would leave them with the fact that I want them to know they can overcome their past. They can overcome their traumas and whatever they feel is holding them back. That nothing is set in stone. Like their past isn't set in stone to keep them trapped or stuck. They have the tools to overcome. They have the tools to move beyond what they think is, I don't know, whatever they believe. They can shift their belief systems to reflect what they want out of life. Mm-hmm. And they could do anything in life. They could have anything in life that they want. Like they could go for it. They could go for the stars and the moon and everything that they could ever think they deserve it all. That's like a real thing, feeling worthy to deserve whatever. Because we were so cut down our self-worth. Like I really had to find my self-worth. Take your power back. You saw me take my power back. Wow. With their kids' dad, they're witnessing it.
Right.
They're witnessing me attempting to get my life in order and getting better, like with my health issues and things there that I have struggled with. And as far as what I want out of life, like I want to give the world my gifts. Like I have a lot of spiritual gifts. I have things that I can offer the world that I would one day like to give to a greater degree than I am now. I'm very much right now focused on my health and my children. That's like where I am right now. But one day I would like to be more focused on like having a life partner,
Right.
and healing together, and going in the same direction to where, you know, aligning with each other and following our heart's desires, and having that be something that we could co-create together. Now, there's no rush, there's no hurry, right? And there's definitely, I definitely, it's like, you know what? Yeah, I want my kids to have a father figure, because right now they really don't have a father figure. And we'll see what the future holds. I feel that is something huge in my future that I am to do. Some destined purpose.
Absolutely.
That I still have yet to see unfolded in my life.
Well, thank you, Liebe. And I can say that you've definitely lived up to your namesake. You know, your name means love. And I've seen from what you've told me, you've carried it through every scenario in your life. And it has led you here, and it will lead you to beautiful places. And thank you very much for sitting down with me.
Thank you for having me. It was an honor. Thank you, Christian.